Our civilization is not ending. I know it feels like it is. The headlines, the wars, the climate, the sense that everything is accelerating towards some final collapse. But every single generation before you felt exactly the same, and they were all just as certain as you are. The end of the world feeling isn't a warning. It's a glitch in the human mind. And once you see how it works, you can't unsee it. Because here's what almost nobody realizes. The belief that you are living in the final chapter, that your era is uniquely broken, uniquely doomed, is one of the oldest, most repeated ideas in human history. It has been wrong every single time, and it is about to happen to you again. So let's figure out why. Start almost 3,000 years ago. Around 700 BC, a Greek farmer poet named Hesiod sat down and wrote that the world was falling apart. He described 5 ages of humanity, each one worse than the last. Gold, then silver, then bronze, all decaying down to his own time, the age of iron. And the Iron Age, he wrote, was a time of exhaustion, injustice, and rot. People had stopped respecting their parents. The gods had abandoned them. It would only get worse from here. Sound familiar? The Romans inherited this idea and ran with it. Their writers were convinced the great days were behind them, that luxury and corruption were eating the republic alive, that the youth had gone soft. This is the strange thing historians notice again and again. Dig into almost any era, and you'll find people insisting their own time is the rotten end of a better world. The feeling that things used to be good and now we're sliding toward the finish is so old that the oldest literature we have is already complaining about it. And when a real catastrophe hits, that slow dread becomes a fever overnight. In 1347, the Black Death arrived in Europe and began killing on a scale no one had ever imagined. Within a few years, it wiped out somewhere between a third and half of the entire continent. To the people living through it, there was only one possible explanation. This was the end. God's final judgment had come, and out of that terror rose a movement called the flagellants. Tens of thousands of them marched from town to town, stripped to the waist, whipping themselves bloody with iron-tipped cords in the public square, trying to atone for all of humanity before the world ended. They were so certain the apocalypse had arrived that the Pope himself had to condemn them in 1349 to stop the panic from spreading. The world did not end. The plague passed. Europe buried its dead and rebuilt. But mass death is one trigger. The purest version of the fever is the belief in a date, that the end is coming soon, on a specific day. Take the year 1000. The story goes that as the millennium approached, all of Europe trembled, certain the world would end. The truth is messier. Historians still argue about how widespread the panic really was, and much of the dramatic version was invented by writers centuries later. But that's the fascinating part. The end of the world feeling is so seductive that people went back and inserted it into history where it may never have happened. Then came 1666. The year carried the number 666, the mark of the beast, and when the Great Fire tore through London, burning for days, thousands were certain this was it. Final judgment, the world did not end. Jump to 1844. An American preacher named William Miller did the math on biblical prophecy and announced the exact date Christ would return, October 22nd. Tens of thousands of followers gave away their belongings and waited. The sun rose the next morning. Nothing had happened. It is literally remembered as the Great Disappointment. And here is where it gets strange. You would think that when the world fails to end, the believers would quietly admit they were wrong. They almost never do. In 1954, a psychologist named Leon Festinger infiltrated a small doomsday group that believed a great flood would destroy the world on a specific December morning. He wanted to watch what happened when the prophecy failed. When midnight came and went and the world was still there, the group didn't fall apart. They became more convinced than ever. They decided their faith had saved the planet, and instead of going quiet, they started calling newspapers desperate to recruit more believers. Festinger turned this into one of the most important ideas in psychology: cognitive dissonance. When reality contradicts a belief we've built our identity around, we don't drop the belief. We bend reality to protect it. The apocalypse doesn't die when it fails, it just reschedules. So why is this feeling so universal? Why does every generation in every culture keep arriving at the same conclusion? The answer isn't religion. Religion is just the costume. Underneath is something in the wiring of the human mind. Psychologists have a framework for it called terror management theory. The core idea is this: you are the only animal animal that knows with certainty that it is going to die. That knowledge is unbearable, so your mind spends enormous energy keeping it buried. But in times of chaos, war, plague, collapse, rapid change, the fear leaks out. And here's the twist. An apocalypse is strangely comforting. If the whole world ends with you, then you aren't dying alone and forgotten while life carries on without you. You are part of the most important moment in history. There is something almost flattering about it. It is easier to believe you live at the dramatic climax of the human story than to accept your one forgettable chapter in the middle. The end of everything gives your small, brief life an enormous meaning. The apocalypse is how the human mind turns the terror of your own death into a story where you matter. And don't think for a second this is just ancient superstition. We do it now. We just swapped the language of God for the language of science. After the First World War, they called it the war to end all wars because the slaughter was so total people genuinely believed humanity could not survive another. Then we split the atom. In 1947, a group of scientists who had helped build the bomb, including Einstein and Oppenheimer, created the Doomsday Clock and set it at 7 minutes to midnight. For the first time, the apocalypse wasn't a prophecy. It was a real button we could press. Then, 2012, when the Maya calendar rolled over and half the internet braced for the end. And now it's the climate, the algorithms, the wars, the sense that the whole system is about to tip. Every age finds the most powerful, most plausible threat of its time and decides it is the final one. Now, right about here, you're probably thinking the obvious objection. But this time is actually different. The Romans didn't have nuclear weapons. Hesiod didn't have a warming planet or artificial intelligence. Those old fears were superstition. Ours are real. And you're right, that's the hardest part of all of this. The threats we face today are real, measurable, and some of them genuinely could end us. But here's the trap. Every generation believed the exact same thing about its own threats. And to them, those threats were just as real and just as unprecedented. The family watching the Black Death erase half of their world was not being superstitious. The scientists who built the Doomsday Clock were not paranoid. The danger was real every single time. Real danger has always been the raw material the apocalypse feeling is built from. A genuine threat is not proof of the end. It never has been. So you might think, fine, but it's harmless. It isn't. One survey of more than 1,000 Americans found that nearly a third believe the world will end within their own lifetime. And a belief like that has a cost. When you are convinced the end is near, you stop planning, you stop building. Why save? Why plant a tree? Why fight for a future you're sure won't arrive? The apocalypse feeling doesn't just predict collapse. It can quietly push people to give up on a future that is still fixable. The danger was never the prophecy. The danger is what the prophecy does to you today. So here's how you break the spell. The next time that feeling rises, the certainty that this time is different, that we're finally at the end, recognize it for what it is. It isn't a clear-eyed reading of the news. It's a 3,000-year-old reflex, the human mind mistaking the end of your world for the end of the world. Your fears are real. Plague was real. The bomb is real. The climate is real. Every generation faced genuine danger, and the danger mattered. The point isn't to stop caring. The point is to stop confusing fear with prophecy. Because the leap from this is dangerous to this is the end. That leap is the glitch, and every single generation before you took it and was wrong. Hesiod thought he lived in the last worst age. The flagellants whipped themselves through dying cities, waiting for judgment. The people of 1666 watched London burn. The Millerites stood in their fields and counted down, and they all had one thing in common with you. They were certain, and they were all still here long enough to be wrong, and to keep planting, keep building, keep raising children into a future they were sure would never come. That future did come. You are standing in it. The world has ended 1,000 times inside the human mind, and not once in reality. Tonight, you'll open your phone and the feeling will find you again. The headlines will whisper that this is it, and now you'll know exactly what that whisper is. Our civilization is not ending. It just feels like it, the same way it has always felt to everyone who ever lived.